Hi, and welcome to an NT Daily Special Report on the opioid crisis. I'm Alexis Reese. Overdose deaths in the U.S. have nearly doubled since 1999. The president declared opioid addiction a national crisis. At this point, the state of Texas has spent more than $1 billion trying to fight the problem. We'll bring you stories from counselors, advocates, first responders, and family members that see the impact of addiction firsthand. The influence of opioids goes deeper than just the user. It can impact families, friends, and other close loved ones. NT Daily's Daniela Ibarra spoke to one UNT student who knows the effects all too well.
I just couldn't believe that it had actually happened, like he had actually gone through with it successfully.
Suicide is something Carmen Sanchez is all too familiar with.
I just remember busting out in tears, like I couldn't breathe, like I didn't comprehend it.
About 3 years ago, Carmen's cousin Justin ended his own life after a long battle with depression and drug use.
He was like an older brother to me.
Carmen says Justin's death wasn't a surprise to her. He had tried to kill himself just 3 months earlier. She said he had been hanging around the wrong crowds. And for the second time in 16 years, the Sanchez family had to bury one of their own in the same circumstances. Carmen's dad, Tommy, lost his life when she was only 3 years old.
He actually took his life while I was there. He was supposed to be watching me, and my mom came home to find him.
Carmen says she feels like her family is ashamed to talk about why Justin and Tommy are gone. But in order to prevent other families from the same tragedy, Carmen wants to spark a conversation.
Talking about it more and, making sure that your family's okay, making sure that your friends are okay is what's important, because you never know when they're going to think enough is enough.
Daniela Ibarra, NT Daily News.
If you feel like you, a friend, or family member is struggling with a substance use disorder, you can call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at 1-800-662-4357. For UNT students, you can reach out to the Office of Rehabilitation and Health Services at 940-565-2488. NT Daily's Shelby Whitley spoke to Dr. Justin Watts, a UNT assistant professor specializing in rehabilitation services, about the misconceptions surrounding addiction.
Can you talk a little bit about the stigma around addiction and why you think it may be hard for some people to see it as a disease?
Oh, that's a complicated question. So how I would define stigma would be a negative set of beliefs that are often unfair, untrue, that are held about a certain group or certain behavior. So when it comes to substance use disorders, a lot of people that are engaging in marginalized behaviors are engaging in something that's socially unacceptable, like substance abuse. They tend to be stigmatized more so than others. And so stigma exists simply because people do not understand addiction. As family members, as friends, it's really easy to get wrapped up in the behaviors because they're frustrating. And when you look at substance use as simply a behavior or a choice, without understanding the underlying mechanisms there that are at play, you ask the question, why can't someone just stop? Why can't you just quit? And that's something where I used to work with a lot of family members that would ask me that very question. And that would show me, really their level of understanding at that point. So, a lot of my job as a counselor was educating people, educating families. That's my job as a faculty member, is really helping people to understand what addiction is. And so, back to my point where, stigma exists because people don't understand addiction. When you look at rates of treatment, people who are seeking treatment, rates of trauma, 70 to 90% of people who are seeking treatment have screened positively for a trauma history. That could be post-traumatic stress disorder. You also have 50 to 70% of people have mental health related issues. That could be depression, anxiety, bipolar, and it could be something a bit more severe than that. And so when you look collectively at what people are experiencing, they're in a tremendous amount of pain. And when you look at the nature of the disease, that was often something that was well in the works before somebody picked up their first beer, before they picked up their first drug. And so I think it's really important to help people understand that there's a lot of developmental issues that are happening. You know, people, in a recent study that I conducted off of my dissertation, we found that 86% of that sample that were actively seeking treatment for a substance use disorder screened for child maltreatment. And that's a big deal, because that tells us that this group of people have something in common, and that is that experience of early childhood trauma. And that changes the developing brain in such a way that makes people so much more likely to experience substance use disorder later in life.
And just one more question, just for our viewers' sake, is there anything new in research that you think will help people in the rehabilitation phase? Like, is there anything coming in the future that you think will help, since we are, you know, it is such a big problem now, especially around the coastal areas, and it's just continuing to be a big problem. Can you let our viewers know that, you know, that we have something in the way that, you know, that's going to help with this, that's going to help with people who are suffering from it, and for people who are watching who probably should be in rehab, like maybe something that they might look forward into, might educate themselves, so that it's just a brighter prospect in helping in the way of recovery?
I think the focus right now on recovery in itself, you know, one of the studies that we recently submitted in my department was looking at collegiate recovery program directors and how they define success in their programs. One of the most interesting things that we found was that they never mentioned abstinence or sobriety. You know, it's a key part of the process, but instead of looking at those two things as at the forefront to where somebody just has to stop using, imagine what we're asking people to do, right? Give up your primary means of coping with distress and just trust me, right? It'll work. And so what I mean by this recovery movement is that we're focusing on the things that enhance quality of life, that help people to functionally deal with that distress. It might be that, you know, we're focusing on holistically helping them find employment. It might be helping them, you know, get a stable, safe place to live. But also, what other skills do you need? How do you cope with your emotions? So recovery is this whole holistic thing that really deals with every aspect of life. And I think that it's sort of an inverse or a switch from focusing on just stop using and white knuckle your way through this, get through it, and things will be better. Instead, let's find out what kind of supports you need, what kind of things do we need to help you obtain a better quality of life, and then all of a sudden you start seeing substance use reduce or substance use stop. And so that to me is a very hopeful thing, because it's actually giving people skills, lifelong skills that they can take from them after treatment. But also the importance of understanding, you know, the different mechanisms that need to be in place, that continued support people need even after they get out of treatment. Because I think a lot of people expect somebody to go into treatment and be completely cured, completely healed, but really it's a long journey afterwards. And I think that people need continued support even post-treatment in order to be successful. So that's just one of the aspects of when I talk about recovery supports, is having peer support, having, you know, either a 12-step group or smart recovery or some sort of, you know, just place to go and to make sure that you're where you need to be.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Watts. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, back to you, Alexis.
We couldn't show you everything on this special, but Dr. Watts had a lot more to say about the challenges of eliminating the stigma around substance abuse disorder and battling one of the most misunderstood diseases affecting millions of Americans each day. We are posting the full interview on our website so you can see it there. The web address is here on your screen. The work to help people understand this complicated disease goes beyond doctors and counselors. NT Daily's Marina Feliciano tells us what one North Texas group is doing to stop the stigma.
Stop the Stigma is a nonprofit organization that educates the public and offers financial assistance to those who are in need of counseling services. Cade Anderson founded STS after a friend took his life. This moved him to start a nonprofit dedicated to eradicating the stigma society places on mental health issues.
People treat addiction as if it's a standalone issue, when more often than not, addiction is a manifestation of something else that's going on, whether it's whether it's a traumatic experience, whether it is a pre-existing mental illness like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, very rarely does addiction stand alone.
Anderson feels that stopping the stigma has a lot to do with educating others on the issue and understanding exactly what it is. STS has put on fundraisers throughout the year to help the organization and educate the community.
Words hold a lot of power, and when we say hurtful things like "get over it," that hurts almost as much as being physically hit by someone else. It doesn't look the same, but it has the same effect.
Marina Feliciano, NT Daily News.
If you would like to donate to Stop the Stigma, please visit stopthestigma.org. NT Daily's Amarani De La Sancha spoke to the UNT Collegiate Recovery Program about the services it provides to students directly or indirectly affected by substance abuse.
Seeking help is difficult and can be even more challenging when searching for substance use treatment. Here at the University of North Texas, the Collegiate Recovery Program was created to help students get back on track. Amy Trail, the CRP director, sees it as an opportunity for students to help each other.
A peer-driven program, so it's students in recovery helping other students in recovery.
If you know someone who may need immediate help, Trail suggests letting a school official know.
If a student or a community member thinks that someone may be in trouble, is to let a faculty or staff member know so that they can contact the appropriate folks on campus and that student can get help.
The CRP incorporated a serenity room inside the office for students to come in with the intent of helping them relax. Although stigma still exists surrounding opioid treatment, one of the best ways to help someone going through this process is to support them in any way you can.
We thrive, when we have some type of support system around, whether it's family, friends, a recovery group. I think it's essential to successful recovery.
An additional important detail Trail wants to ensure students is that they will be free of judgments when they become members of the CRP.
As it's like a huge family, so students know that they're going to be welcome no matter what. They're not going to be judged. They can come in and talk about whatever they need to, and we're here for them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For more information regarding the UNT CRP, visit their website at recovery.unt.edu. Amarani De La Sancha, NT Daily News.
Texas has spent $1.9 billion in the last decade on treatment and making medications to treat overdoses available.
We purchased it approximately a year ago. Ultimately, my chief basically had the forward thinking to recognize that the opioid epidemic was going to eventually make its way to North Texas, and he came to the conclusion that he would rather have the department to have equipment necessary that if we encountered somebody that was ODing, than us to show up on scene and not have what we need to save a life. Basically, the way this essentially works is, if you can imagine, the same way with like putting in like the nasal sprays that you use, to clean out your nose or for colds and flus and stuff. Basically, you would inject this into the nasal cavity just like you would one of those stuff, and then you would push in on this, and it releases the medicine into the nose, and from there it'll work its way to the brain. At this point, we have not had to use it at all. The most recent situation I can encounter or think of occurred off campus, and at that point, that by the time we were actually on scene, it was too late. That's the one thing that's dangerous with the opioids, is that when we're reaching that the overdose level, you're talking about minutes that count, and that's why this medicine is super, super important, is because it extends those minutes into more minutes to get somebody to the hospital, potentially save a life.
The Denton Fire Department runs the ambulance service for all the city of Denton. We took over the paramedic level of service, and for as pretty much all of that time, we've carried Narcan on the ambulance. It's something that we use probably on average once or twice a week. We've seen a steady growth along with all of our ambulance calls. As those have increased over the year, our usage of Narcan has increased. Someone calls 911, our dispatchers take the information, and while one of them is taking the information, another one is dispatching the closest fire engine and ambulance, because on an overdose call we send 2 units, and that puts 5 or 6 paramedics onto the scene. We talk to people on the scene. We look around for any signs if we can find what they may have been taking, and that's one of the nice advantages of having 5 or 6 paramedics on the scene. We have standing orders so that we can immediately give up to a certain amount of Narcan, and then after that we call into our medical control, speak to one of our doctors, and so if we suspect it's either that dosage isn't working like it normally would, then or if we see that they may have taken fentanyl or something, then we can call in and ask for permission, or basically a prescription to give a larger dose than normal.
This is an ongoing issue, and the conversation does not stop here. Here's another look at the resources available if you or someone you know needs help for addiction. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of NT Daily News.